The children. Yeah.
Mhm.
So we're getting a crowd here. We're getting a crowd. Paul, you're a draw. And I think it really, you are because you're you, but also I think people are really wanting to be involved, and we're so lucky to have the International Institute here. And, we've participated in different things over the years, like the camp, and, we've often done, we used to do it a lot. We haven't done it in a while, but we used to do, like we'd call up and say, give us a couple of families and tell us what they need. And we would do a collection and, make sure everybody got what they, good start. But, in addition to that kind of stuff, I think people are really anxious to help.
Yeah,
Well, to welcome people.
it's been a few years since we've had, some robust, refugee families into St. Louis. I mean, the last 4 years were not the
Right.
the greatest. So yeah, it's, there's probably a lot of pent up, desires to help folks who are struggling and coming in from overseas and things like that. So
yeah, I mean, we feel like we have to. That's how we got here,
Right. Absolutely.
Are we still getting Syrian refugees?
There are Syrians coming, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Which that was a group that was banned, for the last 4 years from coming in, as well as Somalis, but Somalis are coming in as well.
Good.
So yeah, so it's going to be a good mix when it all gets revved up again.
Well, I think is it 7? Does somebody have my phone says 7 o'clock. So you think we should get going here? All right. So as I was explaining, welcome everyone. I'll keep letting people in as they trickle in. We are recording this session. I hope that's okay with everybody. But we know that there are people who are streaming, and there are also people who couldn't be here right now, but are going to want to listen to the recording. But we are really, we started this series last week, and we really dove down into many of our texts. And of course, our texts in the Jewish tradition are all about welcoming the stranger. 36 times in the Torah, it says, you will not wrong or oppress the stranger, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt. And it doesn't say you'll be nice to, it doesn't say you'll tolerate, it doesn't say, it says you'll love the stranger. And what does it mean to really love the stranger? And the rabbis do a lot of commentary on that. And we talked a lot about that last time, so I won't go back into that. But, Rashi says, the feeling of the stranger. How painful it is to have to leave everything behind and make a new life for yourself. So your obligation is to welcome the stranger and to make sure that they have what they need to succeed. You will not ill-treat anyone. If you mistreat them, the Torah says, I will heed their outcry, and my anger will blaze forth, and I will put you to the sword. I mean, there's no mincing of any language here. There's there will be huge consequences. So many of our stories are about the blessings that you get when you when you show that radical hospitality, and the consequences of when you do not. In fact, the story of Sodom and Gomorrah is because the people were not welcoming the stranger. They weren't welcoming people into their cities, and that's why they were destroyed. The reason that Abraham and Sarah were tested with their own child was because at Isaac's weaning ceremony, there was a stranger that came by, and they were too busy to welcome him and invite him in. And so they were tested, and there's always consequences. The other thing that we talked about last time that's kind of, I think, worth mentioning, especially with speaking about the International Institute today, is we also talked a little bit about Hias. and the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society, and the legacy of Hias in our that Hias was founded in 1881 to welcome refugees because they were Jewish. But today, Hias welcomes refugees because we are Jewish. And so since then, it is the oldest immigrant aid society in the country. And it continues. When I went to the border, when I went to Mexico, and then when I found my way to Guatemala to see why so many people were coming, why little Alonzo, age 8, and little Jacqueline, age 7, died on our border. I went to Guatemala to learn why that people were leaving. And of course, part of that story is that the United States is responsible for what happened in so many of those countries. That, very oversimplified story is when in Guatemala, when the Guatemalan government decided through something called spiritual socialism, they were going to give the land back to the indigenous people, so to lift them out of poverty. And the United States says, oh no, we're sorry, that land belongs to the United Fruit Company. And so the Dulles brothers, convinced the American government, the CIA, to go in and assassinate the president at the time, so that the United Fruit Company wouldn't lose its its land and its fruit and its pickers as cheap labor. So that's on the United States. It's on the United States while many of the countries in Central and South America are suffering. It's on the United States why so many people are impoverished and living in such violence and are coming here. So, it's really important that we understand all of these narratives. And the other thing that is so important and we're so grateful for is having the robust and amazing International Institute right here in St. Louis. So I learned that during the period of 1900 to 1925, the National Board of the YWCA founded nearly 50 International Institute branches across the country. Our own International Institute of St. Louis was founded in 1919. In 1923, it separated from the YWCA and at that time joined the St. Louis Community Chest, today named the United Way. St. Louis would be a different place if it wasn't for the International Institute. So it really is, it's a privilege that we have as our speaker tonight, as our guest tonight, Paul Costigan. Is that how I say it? Great. Let me get Melissa back here, who is the Senior Vice President for Operations and Missouri Refugee Coordinator at our own International Institute. He's with the Missouri Office of Refugee Administration. He's worked at the International Institute of St. Louis since 1999. You'll correct me if I get anything wrong, and currently does serve as the Missouri State Refugee Coordinator in the agency's Missouri Office of Refugee Administration. Last week, we also shared some stories. Everybody on the Zoom, Paul had a story of how their family were refugees. That's the Jewish story as well. Certainly my grandparents were refugees, and had they not come to this country when they did, like most of my grandparents' families, the rest of them, we would not be here today because most of them were killed during either pogroms or the Holocaust. So we welcome Paul. He is also Senior Vice President of Operations and is responsible for the agency's technology and physical plant. So he is going to do a PowerPoint for us tonight, and he knows how to do that. I'm really impressed with that. The other thing that we learned from your bio is that you received your master's degree from Notre Dame in German literature and is a Peace Corps, a former Peace Corps volunteer, having served in Slovakia from 1995 to 1997. That's about all I know. But, so if there's more that we need to know,
That
Paul will
that
tell us. But
pretty
again,
much hits the highlights for sure.
thank you again for being here with us. We really appreciate this because this is the topic that's, I think, in everyone's hearts today as we see the Afghani refugees, as we see the Haitian refugees, as we continue to wonder what's going on with the Syrian refugees. And so, and we're looking forward to knowing more about how we can be a part of the solution of welcoming the stranger. Thank you.
Right. Well, thank you for inviting me. It's a real pleasure to talk to everybody, and hopefully I'll spur some discussion with the PowerPoints that I've brought with me, and I'd be happy to answer questions as we go along, or you can wait until they're over with, and can just be very upfront and kind of tell you what's going on. It's not an easy the refugee work is not an easy industry. It's the people industry, and every family that you encounter is a family that has a rich history, a family that is going to endure a lot of hardships as they come into the United States. And so we want to treat each family as an individual and not as an assembly line of refugees coming in. And so and it's going to be hard to do. With the volume of people that we're expecting. It'll be a very, very trying experience, and that's why the International Institute has made calls out to the community in general to assist in the resettlement of the Afghans as they come in, as well as other refugee families. So it's gonna take the whole community to make this a successful resettlement. As you've heard, I'm the state refugee coordinator. I've been in that position since 2018, and in my PowerPoint, I'll give a little bit of background about my work and my staff's work in the Missouri Office of Refugee Administration, and then go into kind of this scenario of what's happening right now with the Afghans and their resettlement into the United States, and specifically into St. Louis. So let me see if I can recreate the magic of this. Okay, everybody see that okay? Perfect. Okay, so my office is the Missouri Office of Refugee Administration, kind of that logo up there, and our vision statement is a Missouri that values and champions refugees. So that's really essentially what we do. We are an arm, an office within the International Institute of St. Louis. We were founded in 2018, the little bit of history, of more recent history of the refugee resettlement program. The refugee resettlement program, as we know it today, started in 1980 with the passage of the United States Refugee Act. That really solidified how refugees would be welcomed into the United States, and kind of the structure around the federal government's refugee program. Not to say that there weren't refugees coming in, before that, but the Refugee Act really kind of codified how refugees would be brought from overseas and then resettled into local communities in the United States. Prior to 2018, the Missouri Department of Social Services administered the state refugee program, and they as a state agency, which is very typical for programs across the country, state agencies have a big role to play for the refugee program. But the state of Missouri decided to leave the administration of the refugee program, and so in 2018, the state refugee program was turned over to the International Institute of St. Louis. And then at that same time, MOHORA, Missouri Office of Refugee Administration, was founded. I became the state refugee coordinator, and then off we went. So our kind of the how we work at MOHORA is, like I said, our vision statement was the Missouri that values and champions refugees. We are a statewide agency, so we deal with more than just St. Louis. Our mission is promoting the well-being and inclusion of refugees by resourcing and coordinating resettlement programs across the state. How we do that is we subcontract with local refugee agencies in Missouri. Currently, there are 2 agencies in Kansas City, Jewish Vocational Service and Della Lamb. There's one in Springfield, which is the International Institute of Southwest Missouri. One in Columbia, which is a Catholic Charities organization, and then of course the International Institute of St. Louis. We also subcontract with the Missouri Department of Elementary and Secondary Education for a program called Refugee School Impact, which provides funds to local school districts so that they can hire teachers of English as a second language and buy materials and things for students who are non-native English speakers. We've also started working with an organization in Southwest Missouri called RAISE, and they are in Joplin, Missouri, and have just started working and providing support services to refugees down there. The programs that we run are refugee cash and medical assistance. Refugees get 8 months of a small monthly stipend to help them with their monthly expenses. There's a refugee social services program, which is an employment assistance program. We have services to older refugees, which assist elderly refugees in accessing benefits, in moving towards citizenship, and providing a social structure so that they can interact with other refugees. Older refugees have a tendency to become isolated. Oftentimes, their children, request that the elderly refugees take care of the kids while they're at work, and so they become isolated in their homes. And this is an effort to get them out of their homes and speaking with other senior refugees. We have a youth mentoring program. I mentioned the Refugee School Impact program, and then a new one that's about a year old called the Refugee Temporary Assistance Connection. It's also an employment program and a program that aims to provide refugees with additional resources so that they become self-sufficient. So just wanted to show you some statewide refugee arrival numbers. This is for the entire state of Missouri for the full year. And so for going back to 2016, that was the last year of really that robust Syrian refugee program. And that year, the state of Missouri resettled 2,072 refugees. And then we all know what happened in 2016 and on into 2017. I won't go into that, but then you could see that the refugee number started going down precipitously. So 2017, we had across the state, nearly half, cut in half the number of refugees that came into the state at 1227, and then cut in half again in 2018. To 600, a little bit of a bump in 2019. I really don't know why that happened very much, except for the fact that the state did a lot of resettlement of Congolese refugees in 2019. And then again, cut in half in 2020. And then 2021 through September, I don't have sorry, that's through August. I don't have the September numbers yet, but that was at 292. We will be well above 2020's numbers after the September numbers come in, because all of the refugee agencies across the state were doing a lot of resettlement in September. And then our anticipated total for next year is 2305. And that does not even include the Afghan parolees, who we will talk about in just a second. So it's even more than we did in 2016, which is a very, very busy year. So we're expecting 2022 to be an exceedingly busy year for resettlement, not only with kind of these standard families of refugees coming in from places like Syria and Somalia and Eritrea and Sudan, Ukraine, Central Asia and Eastern Asia. So it's going to be fairly busy. And then the International Institute refugee arrival numbers, you can see kind of the same thing. I mean, going back to 2016, they resettled 1,158. And then it drops by more than half, and then by more than half again. A little bump in 2019, then in half again. And then so far this year, through September, again, that's through August, it's a typo, 171 individual refugees. This is not refugee families, this is individual people, have been resettled in St. Louis. So for 2022, the anticipated number for the International Institute is 1,050. And again, that does not include the large numbers of Afghan parolees that they're expecting to resettle this year too. And if you can see, there's a little difference between FY, which is a federal fiscal year, which runs from October 1st to September 30th, and then the calendar year, which I have on some of these from the International Institute. We tend to look, even though the federal fiscal year looks at that, we tend to look at past numbers over the course of a calendar year, but it's essentially the same. So again, very robust. We're going to be extremely happy to have over 1,000 new refugees come into St. Louis, and they've already started. So October 1st is when resettlement starts. We have information on incoming families already for October, and they'll be coming in very fast and furious. And I'll talk a little bit about how the community can support this large number in some later slides. So so this is a little bit about the federal program that is called OAW at this point, Operation Allies Welcome. In July 2021, President Biden launched Operation Allies Refuge, which is now known as Operation Allies Welcome, to support relocation of Afghan nationals and their families eligible for special immigrant visas. And the special immigrant visas were given to Afghans who had in some way assisted the US military in its operation overseas since 2002, essentially. There's definite requirements for those special immigrant visas. Originally, an Afghan had to have worked for 2 years with the US military or with a contractor to be eligible for a special immigrant visa, which would allow them and their families to emigrate to the United States. Once the evacuation started, Operation Allies Refuge kicked into gear, and the United States began airlifting Afghans out of the Kabul airport into neighboring countries to assist them, essentially, and then start the processing piece before moving them on to the United States. So they started off at Fort Lee, Virginia. That's where all of the SIVs were brought after as part of the evacuation. And I know everybody remembers, because it was just 2 months ago, essentially, the pictures on the news of these aircraft, these large aircraft, just absolutely packed with people trying to flee the Taliban and Al Qaeda and ISIS and those terrorist organizations in Afghanistan. So some of those people that were the first to be moved out were granted a status called SQSI, because they had started the SIV process, but they hadn't finished it because they hadn't gone those 2 years of working for the United States government. So maybe they had a year or a year and a half or something like that. So they were given a special status so that they can complete that SIV status. And then, due to the urgency of the humanitarian evacuations after the fall of Kabul, there were interagency and non-governmental organizations established to process Afghans overseas and within the United States, most of whom have been granted parole. So you'll hear me talk a little bit today about parolees. Those are the majority of people who were evacuated, the vast majority, I'll say, who were evacuated out of Afghanistan and are now in safe havens in the United States. The safe havens are military bases that were very quickly set up to house and accommodate tens of thousands of parolees. I know that Fort Lee, Virginia, I think, was the first. There's Fort Atterbury in Indiana, which would be the closest one to us. Fort Bliss in Texas, Anna Village in New Mexico, Fort Dix in New Jersey, Fort McCoy in Wisconsin, which is a very large base that holds quite a substantial number of parolees, and then Fort Pickett in Virginia. They've also, to some lesser extents, have set up Quantico and Holloman Air Force Base in New Mexico as additional sites that are holding these parolees. All of the parolees that are coming in from overseas, and there are still many thousands of parolees who are still overseas. They come in through 2 points of entry in the United States, either Dulles Airport, which is outside Washington, D.C., and Philadelphia International. So both of those airports are, you know, in a proximity to Fort Lee and Quantico and Fort Dix and things like that. So it makes the transportation easier from those airports to these military bases. So the OAW as of 9/24, and these are the latest numbers I've still heard, even though it's, you know, well past 9/24, is that there are 53,000 people residing at the safe havens, which I just mentioned. Those are the U.S. military bases. They have begun moving people off those bases. But it's not as large of a number as they're going to need to move off those bases in the near future. And then there are 16,000 plus people residing at what are called lily pads. And those are the United States military bases that are overseas in places like Doha, Qatar, and in Italy, and in Germany, and in England. They're using those bases as basically way stations before those refugees actually come into the United States and end up on the United States military bases. What's happening at the military bases, at the lily pads, is that they are the United States government, Department of Homeland Security, FBI, are all doing security checks on all of those Afghan evacuees who ended up at the lily pads. So who were evacuated but have not yet come to the United States. So so basically what needs to happen is those 53,000 that are at the US military bases need to start moving out into local communities like St. Louis, so they can start moving the 16,000 who are still overseas into the United States bases. So it's kind of like the lily pads are kind of like these jumping off points, if you look at it that way, from Afghanistan to a military base overseas, and then another jump to the United States military base, and then from there to the local communities. So resettlement to local communities, the federal government, Department of Homeland Security is actually running this whole Operation Allies Welcome, and they are expecting, probably starting in November, just to be moving about 3,500 people from the safe havens each week onto to local communities. So it's going to really ramp up very quickly. And you know, there's, if you can imagine, you know, how slow the wheels of government work, and trying to get 3,500 people, you know, onto flights and having their documentation with them, and you know, coordinating with local communities to be bringing, you know, that many people into you know, cities and communities all across the country. So there's about 202 agencies so far in the United States that are going to participate, that are going to do the local resettlement of the Afghan parolees. So, and then of course the ones in Missouri are the ones I've mentioned. Obviously, the International Institute, Springfield is going to, Kansas City, and then in Columbia. Those are all participating in the resettlement these folks. And then arrivals are going to increase about mid-October. That's basically where we are now. We had kind of a slow little period in the beginning, the end of September and the beginning of October. Now it's going to be really hectic in across the country and moving people off these bases and into local communities. And then the Afghan guests will depart the safe havens with their immigration required biometrics. So the federal government is taking biometrics, thumbprints, fingerprints, background data on all of them. They're going to have a medical clearance. All of the Afghans that are on military bases are being vaccinated for mumps, measles, rubella, polio, COVID-19, and they're given a TB screening before they actually leave the base. The people are held for 21 days after those vaccinations to make sure that those vaccinations kick in. There was an incident where there were 2 measles cases at 2 different bases in August, and so they decided, after giving the measles vaccinations to everybody, they'll wait 21 days to make sure that that they are not going to be spreading the measles to local communities. So that's why they're being held. They're also given an EAD, which is an employment authorization document, which is valid for 2 years. That's how long their parole is also valid for. And I'll explain in a little bit how they'll be able to stay longer than those 2 years, but that initial parole was for 2 years. They have an I-94 parolee document, which entitles them to be in the United States. It's essentially a visa for being in the U.S., and it's a document that that they can show to anybody to prove that they belong in the United States and are not, undocumented, for example. And then their medical records from their time on the base will come with them too, so they can see when they got their vaccinations and their TB screenings and the results of all those screenings and things like that. Now, the Department of State has an office within it called the Bureau of Population, Refugees and Migration, or PRM, and they have been requesting capacity plans from local resettlement agencies such as the International Institute to support this new program that is called APA, Afghan Placement and Assistance Program. So what happened was that all of the local agencies in Missouri and really all across the United States said, okay, between October and December, really into January and a little bit into February, we can conceivably resettle with our staffing structure and with the housing available and with our community support, X number of Afghan refugees over the course of the next 5 months. The International Institute put their number at 350 people. Columbia, Missouri put theirs at 300 people. JVS in Kansas City also put theirs at 300 people. Springfield 100, and then another organization in Kansas City called Della Lamb put theirs at 250. So altogether, that came out to 1,300 people, or 1,300 people. This map was produced in September of last month, and showed, how many people each state altogether had put their capacity at to do resettlement of refugees. This was before Springfield jumped in with 100. So it was originally at 1,200 people, with Kansas City, St. Louis, Columbia, all added up together. Now you can see that we have a larger capacity, and I would say more generosity than all of the surrounding states around us, including big states like Illinois and Ohio and Pennsylvania and New York, and Florida, and Oregon, and some of these others. So so Missouri really stepped up to say that we will handle a good number of Afghan refugees, Afghan parolees, over the next coming next few months. So originally that number was 1,200. Then when Springfield jumped in with their 100, it went up to 1,300. And since then, the International Institute has increased their number as well, to, from 350 to 500. So we are at close to 1,500 people that we expect to resettle in Missouri over the course of the next 5 months. And so it's an incredible number. It's going to make the refugee agencies incredibly busy. And so they are doing a lot of hiring. They're looking for people that speak Dari and Pashto, which are the predominant languages in Afghanistan, even though there are also several other languages that are spoken by people that have been moved out of Afghanistan. So yeah, you can see that the internet, or the International Institute in particular, but the state of Missouri in general has really stepped up. I'm actually speaking with the director of Jewish Vocational Services tomorrow, which is doing the resettlement program in Kansas City, and they are adjusting their numbers up as well. So I will find out, that they're going from 300 to, I don't know what it's going to be, but yeah, Kansas City on the other side of the state is pulling their weight as well. So very exciting times for our state. And I think we are, specifically because we are not as populated as Texas and California and Arizona and Washington, those states that have bigger numbers. But we in Oklahoma essentially are the smaller states that are offering an oversized resettlement number based on what our population is in the state. So the capacity for APA, which is again the Afghan Placement and Assistance Program, is a moving target. I mean, I just told you it went from 1,200 to 1,300 to now 1,450, and it's going to change tomorrow too when Hillary at JVS gives me their new number. The assigned capacity, or the combined capacity of the entire United States, is 37,000. So if I go back to the map, if you count up all of the numbers for all of the states, that number will come to 37,000 people that all of the states together have said that they could resettle. However, like I said before, there's 53,000 on the U.S. bases, another 16,000 at the lily pads overseas. We need to be able to resettle 70,000 people, and so the local resettlement agencies are being asked to increase the numbers of people that they're going to be able to resettle. like I said, Missouri currently is at 1450 and St. Louis is at 500, but those numbers will probably go up. I mean, the Missouri number will definitely go up tomorrow. I think the St. Louis number will stay at 500 for a while until they get to the 500 number, whereby they'll be asked again, can they take any more families to resettle in the community? So even though the International Institute has said that they will resettle 500 Afghans, we won't know how many they will have resettled until the whole program, the whole OAW program is finished. And then we'll know how many people the International Institute resettled or the state of Missouri was able to resettle. The bulk of arrivals are going to arrive between now and the end of December, but they are going to continue on into March. So they're trying to move, like I said, 3,500 people off the bases every week. And so by the end of December, that's what, 10 weeks. So that's, 35,000 people that they hope to have off the bases by December. But there'll always be more in January and February and things like that. If you remember where these safe haven military bases are, you'll remember that there are ones in Wisconsin and ones in New Jersey, which are all kind of cold weather environments. So, and the conditions on those bases are suboptimal, is the way that they've said. People are living in barracks and in tents. They're standing in line for food. Fort McCoy in Wisconsin has 13,000 people on it. And so they are trying the best they can to provide whatever they can, but there really are no recreational facilities for the kids, for example. A little bit, here and there with like soccer balls and things like that, but there's nothing that has been arranged for families to learn English, to have the kids play, or have the kids go to school, to learn, to have some sort of community orientation about living in the United States. All of that stuff is not happening on the bases. And so that's why there is this really urgent necessity of getting people off those bases and into local communities where they can, essentially start their lives all over again. Some of the problems that the International Institute and all of the agencies across the United States are going to have are both short-term and permanent housing. Because they're becoming so quickly, it would probably be unlikely that these families will have more permanent housing when they arrive. So the International Institute is working with hotels, they're working with Airbnb, they're working with universities to try to locate some temporary housing for these families as they arrive, and that buys them a little bit more time so they can try to find more long-term housing over the course of the first few days or weeks that they are in St. Louis. Housing is very difficult in a normal circumstance because of the lack of available housing that is large enough to meet some of these big Afghan families that are going to be coming. Some of the families, I think that there was a family today that came in, a family of 8, but that is by no means the largest family. I think Columbia had on consecutive days a family of 9 and a family of 8. And there are families of 11 that are also in the pipeline. So really big families. If anybody has an apartment that would house a family of 11, you can always call us. We'd be happy to talk to you. But in reality, apartments, apartment for 11 people really does not exist because of occupancy codes and that kind of thing. So the agencies and the International Institute is going to have to be very creative in developing this long-term housing for these larger families. There's also going to be issues of health and mental health capacity. There are, from what I've heard on the bases, there are an extraordinary number of pregnant women who are on the bases right now, and if probably, sleeping with your family in a tent on a military base is probably not the most ideal thing for a pregnant woman, and the medical facilities on those bases is very, very crude. So there are not OBGYNs that are readily available. They really need to get for example, these pregnant women off the bases and into local communities where they can really get the care that they need, the prenatal care that they need. There's also a variety of other health problems that people are going to be bringing with them. We've heard of people coming over from the lily pads with malnutrition, with skin disorders, just kind of a wide variety of health issues that are going to need to be addressed once they come to local communities. Just to talk about mental health very quickly, and trauma is also going to be a big issue with these families. They have, there is something called forced migration trauma, which a lot of these folks will have experienced by the time they come to the United States. There's the trauma of leaving loved ones behind, not knowing if the loved ones are safe. There's the trauma of having to endure this flight in a military cargo plane where they were sitting on the floor for hours and hours just to get to another military base. There's trauma of having to move into a United States military base and living in a barracks or a tent for so long, not having access to a lot of the conveniences that you and I take for granted. So we're going to see, when these people arrive into St. Louis, a substantial amount of forced migration trauma and other trauma. And so places like the International Institute and Jewish Vocational Services in Kansas City are already lining up their community partners to be able to assess people and their mental health, so that those things can be worked out, because it's really going to be essential that these folks start working right away to be able to support themselves and things like that. But their health and mental health have to be addressed before some of these other things can be addressed. Also, another issue that's going to jump out at us is immigration and legal services. Essentially, they are parolees right now. They only are allowed to remain in the United States for 2 years with that parole status. Parole is a status given by the United States government that is kind of a test. Okay, we will give you parole, but you at some point you need to adjust your status, and so they're going to have to this 70,000 plus people are going to have to adjust their status from parolee to asylee, which will allow them to stay for if they become asylees, then they are legal permanent residents. They never have to leave. And then they can become citizens after that. But that is a lot of immigration lawyer help and things like that the International Institute is going to desperately need to help people fill out paperwork and to do all of the other pieces that are part of an asylee application. So the resettlement of the Afghan parolees looks like this. The Department of State, created the APA program. It's going to look like the same refugee program that other refugees come into, which is called reception and placement. And essentially, it's 90 days of services to try to get people as self-sufficient as possible within those 90 days. The Department of State, again, PRM, has a cooperative agreement with the 9 national resettlement agencies, of which HIAS is, of course, one. And USCRI is a national agency that the International Institute and Jewish Vocational Services in Kansas City are a part of. So there's 9 agencies. They're all working on bringing folks from the bases to local communities. So within that 90-day program, the International Institute and other resettlement agencies are going to provide an airport reception. So picking them up at the airport, we don't want to have them tell them that they have to take an Uber over to their new apartment or something like that. We want to be very welcoming, and so we have people that speak Dari and Pashto there at the airport, and welcoming them to St. Louis. There is also a really nice sign that the city of St. Louis posted in the airport that says, welcome to St. Louis, and imposed in the sign is an Afghan flag on one side and the St. Louis flag on the other side, and the arch in the middle. And then when it says welcome to St. Louis, on the bottom in both Dari and Pashto it says the exact same thing. So they don't have to even speak English to see that they are being welcomed to St. Louis. And the city of St. Louis paid for that sign. It's an absolutely beautiful sign to have posted in the airport. And when I sent the picture of that sign to the Department of State, they were overwhelmed. They said, "What a great thing for St. Louis to do," it was really something. Also part of the 90-day program will be initial housing, cash assistance, like I talked about before, food, clothing, and other essentials, and then case management, which includes accessing health services, enrolling in programs, enrolling kids in schools, for example, and enrolling parents into ESL programs. When this program first started, the access to programs and services and benefits was not available. But when the continuing resolution was passed by Congress in, I think it was like the last day of September or something, then there was a funding allocation to support Afghan parolees, which will allow them to access cash and medical assistance, emergency support services, and additional discretionary grant programs. Those discretionary grant programs are ones I mentioned really early on, the refugee support services, the services to older refugees, the youth mentoring programs, and things like that. So they have access, they can they can or will be able to apply for state benefits such as Medicaid, or temporary assistance. They can also apply for refugee-specific services and benefits, such as refugee cash assistance and refugee medical assistance. So here's a little bit about the Afghan population in general, what the family compositions look like. Most of them have multiple children. They are large, some of them are large multi-generational families. The average size, I think this wasn't scientific, but when they were looking at family sizes at the bases, they determined that the average family size was 5.5. So you would think that for every family of one, like one individual that got on the plane, there's a family of 10 or something like that that is that is there too. So large families. And there are large amounts of kinship care families, which means that you know, when people were fleeing the airport, you know, a person would be handing a child over the fence to another family to ensure that that child was able to escape Afghanistan. So some of those are reunited with, you know, aunts and uncles, for example, but some are not. Some are there without any relatives, and they will be put into a program called unaccompanied refugee minors, which will try to locate family members across the United States that could serve as their sponsors. Medical issues we talked a little bit about before there's a lot of general medical issues, for example, malnutrition, dehydration, dermatological issues. There's some chronic issues that people are going to be bringing with them, such as diabetes and hypertension. They're going to have specialists where they can follow up with oncology, neurology, psychiatrists, and orthopedics. OBGYNs and pediatricians, like I talked about. Large numbers, unfortunately, of miscarriages. Some of those miscarriages happened on those cargo planes as they were leaving Afghanistan, trying to get to other places. Lots and lots of pregnancies. I know that Columbia, Missouri got a woman who was 6 months pregnant and had never seen a doctor. And so that was like the first order of business once she and her family got to Columbia, is like they immediately made a doctor's appointment with their community partners, and so it's really essential that you know, people are that are connected to medical services. There's also dental. Lots of broken teeth, dentures or missing dentures, and poor oral health in general. Mental health and well-being, for the forced migration trauma that I talked about, and especially vulnerable are going to be the children, right? You know, as much as the adults are, you know, have lived through a lot of trauma with, you know, comings and goings of the war in Afghanistan, for example, the children are really going to be susceptible to this trauma from their flight in terms of fleeing from Afghanistan, and then all of the steps that happen along the way. And as of September of last year, or well, essentially last month, there were around 200 unaccompanied children that had been identified at that point. And again, those were people, those were, you know, desperate mothers who were pushing their children over the fences to the U.S. military soldiers who were grabbing them and pulling them over onto the safe side of the fence into at the airport. So we will see what happens with those 200 children. Hopefully, they will be reunited with some family members that are here in the United States. If not, the Office of Refugee Resettlement has a really good unaccompanied refugee children program, and they will find sponsors and foster families for those kids. But you know, who knows that, you know, at some point, you know, if the United States government has the ability, there might be opportunities to bring those parents of these 200 unaccompanied kids over to the United States. But at this point, the United States government has really no authority. They have no presence in Afghanistan right now at all. It's impossible to bring additional Afghans out of the country. We don't have an embassy there. We don't have staff there. We don't have a military there. And so we really have no influence in Afghanistan at this moment at all. We are still there are still people that are coming out of Afghanistan into neighboring countries such as Pakistan and Uzbekistan and Iran. And from there, they have a better chance of making it to one of the lily pads, especially if they can prove that they were an interpreter for the military or somehow worked for the military or an American contractor or an American nonprofit. Those folks will all be coming at some point as well. And there I take a breath. You can see that on this slide is our website, moora.org. Obviously, we like I said before, we are part of the International Institute, so you can always find us under the International Institute website, which is www.iistl.org. Very easy to remember in IISTL. And then you see that as part of my email address there as well. And I'd be very happy to, even after today, if anybody has any questions or would like more information or something on refugees in general or the Afghan parolees specifically, be happy to answer those questions. You can call me as well. I'm happy to take calls and things like that. Our Moora website also has lots of information, both in English and in Dari and Pashto for the Afghans, and so that they can understand what benefits they can apply for, what processes look like and things like that. But it's also good for our native born populations too, to kind of see like, oh, this is how this is working. So there's a lot of educational material on the Moora website, and would encourage you to take a look. You can also, we have a quarterly newsletter that we produce that you can click and get put on the distribution list for that quarterly newsletter as well. So
amazing. I think everybody, if we were in person, you would have an ovation here for
standing ovation, maybe. I don't know.
Amazing information, and what a commitment. I mean, we can't be more grateful for the work that, and the quality work and the intentional work that's being done. I know that I'm sure people have questions. I'd like to just begin maybe asking you, because I know it's what's on a lot of our minds is, we've helped in the past, as I said, settle different groups of refugees as they've come in. and, befriended some of the Syrians who are now, catering. And, there've been some very creative ways, I think, that different congregations especially have been able to help.
Right.
What are some of the more creative things that you've seen that might inspire us to kind of get back involved, especially with the Afghan refugees?
Well, that's a very good question. And one of the things that I'll say right off the bat is that we haven't really even seen the bulk of people come in yet, right? So essentially the people are not here. There are a few families that have come in so far in October, but the big push of refugee families are still to come. And so what I would say is that once they start arriving en masse, that is really when you're going to kind of figure out where your niche is. It's kind of hard to see at the forefront, at the beginnings of things. I know that, and this has been highly publicized and things like that too. The International Institute had a donations drive to get items that they can use to set up people's apartments, and this was also well publicized. The institute was really overwhelmed with the kindness of people in St. Louis. They came out of the woodwork, brought really wonderful items to donate to incoming refugee families, and so but what I would say is that that was all kind of a front end thing, right? That was all like, okay, let's do this now, and then maybe we don't have to do anything in the long run. I would take the longer view if I were you, because there are going to be, like I mentioned in my slideshows, there are going to be lots and lots of issues from health and mental health to employment to getting kids into schools. To cultural orientations and things like that, that are really going to require the International Institute to really rely heavily on the community and community members. And so that is really kind of my take on that is to kind of wait it out a little bit and let all the people that wanted to do something right at the beginning and then go on to some other good cause, let them have that. But then if you really would stick with it, there are going to be a lot of things that the International Institute is going to need over the course of the next year and things like that.
Marion.
This isn't creative, but yesterday I made a fairly large donation to the Institute, and I didn't earmark it in any way. Was that a mistake? I was trusting that the Institute would be channeling the money where they needed it the most, and that it would get to the Afghans if that was...
That's exactly what happens.
Okay.
It goes to the place of the greatest need. And so first, I would like to say thank you very much for that donation. You can see like all the work that is going to be happening over the course of the next year, that it's going to go to good use. There are let me just tell you that for example, Refugee Cash Assistance provides them with $335 for a month. If you know how much it costs to pay rent in St. Louis, you know that it doesn't go that far. So donations such as yours will supplement the ability of the Institute to pay rent on behalf of these clients, for example. There is that APA program that I mentioned does provide a one-time payment of $1,225, and that's all that they're really going to get from the federal government as far as that initial resettlement, which goes a little bit farther but still is not going to last them for very long at all. So and most of that money is spent on behalf of the clients, paying for bus passes, for example, so they can get to and from the institute or to and from their jobs and things like that. We have to buy things for the apartment, even though that we've gotten a lot of good donations and things like beds and sheets have to be new. That's a requirement by the federal government. So that money comes out of the client's portion of that $1,225. So, you know, buying a family of 11, you know, one double bed and nine single beds. I mean, obviously we have deals, you know, because we're good at making, you know, a little bit of money stretch a long way. We've been in this business for 100 years, so we're very good at that. But still, any donation that comes to the International Institute is going to go, you know, directly into the greatest needs of whatever clients. I mean, we're gonna have to buy people. You know, they didn't come with, you know, a full year's supply of clothing, for example. You know, they left. You remember seeing the picture of the plane taking off with the guy clinging on to the airplane tires. That was the desperation of people getting out. And so, you know, people had to climb over walls to get into the airport and things like that. They were not, you know, packing up all of their, you know, their precious belongings and things like that. So, you know, at the military bases right now, clothing is a big issue. The International Institute didn't have the capacity to take clothing, but we're working with community partners, you know, Goodwill and Salvation Army and St. Vincent de Paul and Oasis International and some of those other ones that have more of a capacity to give us donated clothing and things like that. So you know, it's there. I mean, the need. We're still going to figure out where all of the need is going to be, but just rest assured that there is a lot of need. So
I didn't mean it to sound self-serving. I just got lost thinking maybe I should have sent it to Maura, but I think I'm counting on you guys to work it out.
We will work it out.
I'm tired of giving to charities that I know the money never gets there. So.
Yeah. You can, you know, all of, well, not, I'd say the vast majority of the staff at the International Institute are all grant funded. I'm grant funded, so my salary comes out of you know, the Department of State grant that the International Institute has to run the MOORA program. And so, you know, any donation will not be going to like people's salaries and things like that. So
that's great to know. That's something to publicize for sure.
Yeah, you know, we have a very good GuideStar rating, which shows like what percentage of our funds are used for administration and things like that, and it's a very small amount. So
another way, and I don't think that this happens anymore, but I remember with when we did a lot of settlement for Russian immigrants a long time ago, the Jewish community did. And one of the ways that we did that was we adopted families. Yes. I mean, we even did that in St. Louis. I'm looking at Susan Spiegel, people from Katrina. We adopted families that came that had nothing, that left New Orleans, and we adopted families here. Is there any chance? I mean, I think we sort of did that with some of the Syrians that we got to know. Right. We kind of became family with them. Is there any opportunity for congregations to adopt families?
So the Institute doesn't call it adopting or something. Right. They call it co-sponsorship. so that they, the International Institute has a role to play, but then community members, congregations, nonprofit groups and things like that who want to, be of assistance in the resettlement process can work with the International Institute, and they can provide, any number of services to a family. They can do home visits. We desperately need people to do home visits to make sure that the families have the things that they need, because we just don't have enough staff, especially with 500 people coming in the next few months, and then on top of that 1,000 other refugees coming over the next year. So we need people to do home visits. We need people to do home English as a second language training. We need people to take folks grocery shopping and to show them how to use the bus, and to take them to medical appointments. Just really everything that the International Institute does, we depend on volunteers to help out. And in this this community sponsorship model, it is essential. But it's going to be organized so that the co-sponsors are a group of people who will commit to whatever work it is. Anybody that knows about volunteer programs that knows that at the very beginning there's a lot of enthusiasm, but then the enthusiasm kind of dives a little bit as you go. So we're looking at co-sponsors who are going to commit to for the long term.
Great.
And so I can actually send you the email of the person who's going to be setting that up tomorrow when I get back into the office, and then you can connect with them and yeah.
Yeah, we keep getting questions of what could we do, and I think people are really looking for some hands-on,
absolutely,
and to build relationships.
Mm-hmm.
It's certainly. We want to be helpful, and to Marion's point, we want to make sure that the resources are there, and welcoming the stranger means they won't.
Absolutely.
Making sure they won't be strangers anymore. So
it's a twofold benefit, right? I mean, it benefits obviously benefits the families who are moving in and are just kind of like confused about this whole America thing, and but it also benefits the people who are working with them, because they get exposed to a family's ordeal, or a culture, or the way people create meals and that kind of thing. I mean, it's enriching on both sides, and I think that is a key to successful co-sponsorship.
That's great. That's great. Well, we have so much information. I'm just, anybody have any more questions or comments? We have a few minutes left.
Yeah, I'm happy to answer any questions. And like I said, not just today, but you feel free to email me or whatever too. So
you said something about home visits. How do you, if you don't speak the language, tell me what that's going to look like?
Well, there are lots of hand gestures. So we've actually created an outline for what a home visit, yes, exactly, what a home visit should be like. And so, it's helping people, check and make sure that all their light bulbs are working, for example, or and making sure that they have, their rice in a container that is sealed, for example, so it doesn't bring in, mice and that kind of thing. And so any home visitor will go in with kind of like a list of things that they're doing. I would predict, Sarah, that there are more people that will understand, some some language than won't at all. And so just utilizing some basic English will go a long way with these folks, because in general most of them have worked in some aspect with the U.S. presence, with the military and something like that. So so it's even though you might not speak the same language, I think that there are other ways to communicate. So
That's great.
Paul, are we expecting Haitian refugees here too, or at this point we don't know?
So I am doubtful that we will get any Haitians, mostly because the Haitians that came over the border into Texas and were the lucky ones that weren't piled on an airplane and sent back to a country that they hadn't been in years, are here to reunite with family members that are somewhere in the United States, and or if not, where they go where there are already established Haitian communities. And so if you're thinking Florida, for example, that's where I think the majority of them are going to go.
Thank you.
But we do have some. I mean, I spoke with somebody at I can't, the name fails me at this point, but interfaith legal, interfaith legal services or something. It's a Catholic charities organization, and they have worked with people that Haitians that have made it to St. Louis. I think it's again to join family members that are here. So, but I would love to see wholesale Haitians that don't have family members come to St. Louis and make St. Louis their home. I think we can roll out the red carpet as well as anybody, and provide them with the resources they need to get started here and to start their lives in St. Louis. So I would really like to, but it might take a little bit more marketing on my part to make that happen.
We have two big Haitian connections here. One is with the Pat Wolf and her Med and Food for Kids organization, where she, developed that whole peanut butter thing in Haiti. And so I wonder if there's connections there. And also, Catherine Dunham.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
Her whole legacy of being an advocate for the Haitians here. So this would be a good place to welcome.
I mean, there are there are Haitians in St. Louis, but just like every pretty much every other ethnic group that has made St. Louis home, with the exception of the Italians that still live on the hill, I think that there's such a scatter when people come to St. Louis. It's not like cities on the East Coast where New York and Boston and Philadelphia, where you have your Irish Quarter and things like that. And so.
Although the Bosnians, who are, have been tremendous, wonderful addition to St. Louis, do tend to are in South City. Is there
They are South City and Afton areas and things like that. But even there, you see people kind of going, it's like, I want to take my kid, put my kids in in Rockwood or something like that, and so all of a sudden they're off. So so it's very, very unique situation, I think. So.
Well, any last questions for Paul? Paul, you'll hear from us. You've given us a lot of information, a lot of really wonderful food for thought, and kind of the background, the learning that we need, so that, people often want to help, but if you don't understand where it's coming from, you don't understand the story.
Yeah.
We can't, we'll help in the wrong. We want to help in the right ways.
Right.
We
Right.
really want to be helpful in the right ways, and not in and not in a self-serving way at all, but in a way that really does make a difference, because we know we can only be as good as the way that we welcome the stranger here.
Right. And there's such a history of the International Institute and the Jewish community working so closely together. With the summer camp is just the
Right.
most recent example, but it
Yeah.
goes back much further than that.
Mhm.
And so I think that there are going to be great ideas coming out from all over the community on ways to assist and to welcome the stranger.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Paul. Thank you for the work that you do. Thank you for the commitment. Thank you for the way that you do it. And thank you for giving us your time tonight. Hopefully it'll be a good investment, and you'll see you've inspired. And we have a recording of your talk that we'll keep on our website and share with other groups as well.
Well,
So
it was absolutely my pleasure, and wish everybody a nice rest of the evening, and get ready, because it's going to get busy.
good, we're ready. And the other thing that you mentioned, which I think is really important, and for us to be ambassadors for, look at the vetting, look at the careful way that we are bringing people into this country. Look at all the medical attention and the vaccinations and the care that people are getting.
Yeah.
So if anybody says, anything derogatory about how
Absolutely.
we're bringing people in, I think it's really important that we know, and that we are able to say, there's no reason to be concerned with anything, only to know that this will be a blessing for us.
Absolutely.
Good. Well, if nobody else has any questions, again, thank you so much for giving us your time tonight. We really appreciate it. You could see everybody applauding it from their mute
Yay.
places, and
Thank you, everybody. It's been really a wonderful experience.
great. Thanks again, Paul. Thanks,
All right.
everybody, for showing up.
Take care.
All right.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.